Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm the Vice President of Sales with Strategic Planning Online, and welcome to our webinar series, IE Insights by SPOL. And today's topic is going to be, as you can see, the future of IE software to inform your integrated planning process. One of the things that we do here is we try to find thought leaders and talk about integrated strategic planning, and who better than Dr. Nick Santilli from SCUP. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your jumping on here. And, today's learning outcomes are going to be to build an effective framework for integrative strategic planning for institutional effectiveness, practice on campus, create a powerful vision with which all stakeholders feel connected and committed to why they are participating and why it's so important, identifying what elements must be in place to establish a well-defined integrated planning, accreditation, and assessment culture, and share best practices around strategic planning accomplishments to provide evidence for accreditation assurance. So we think that Nick is the perfect person to share how to bring together the human insight and the technology solutions to integrate into that integrated strategic planning process. So before we get started, I do just want to say that the goal of our sessions really with the IE Insights is to bring thought leaders together and practitioners together so that they can share ideas, support each other around some of the trends that are going on, and to really provide an opportunity to hone your craft and work with your peers and learn from your peers. And absent being able to go to conferences and we're missing that human element, we're hoping that IE Insights, provides that venue for us to continue dialogue. And we hope that you come to more of our sessions to kind of brainstorm and share about what's going on. And if anybody is interested in being a guest speaker, I'll have my name at the end of the slide and my contact information. Please feel free to reach out. I know that somebody's in attendance right now, Dr. Carla Moore, who did a wonderful session with us a couple months back. So again, we really hope that what you learned from our session today is something actionable that you can take back and incorporate into your institutions right away and make impact on your business processes. So without further ado, Nicholas, why don't you share with us your background, what you're doing with SCUP and what you're doing with integrated planning, and we'll go from there.
Great, Donna, thank you. And I want to thank SPOL for hosting this webinar this afternoon. I'm Nick Santilli. I'm the Senior Director for Learning Strategy at the Society for College and University Planning. As I look at the list of attendees, I know there are a few SCUPers among the crowd, so I'm really happy to see you here. Glad to have you aboard. And I think one of the things that really is important here is having this conversation around integrated planning. That the planning process and the entire planning portfolio is bigger than just a strategic plan. There's more to it there. And I came to learn this through the work I did when I transitioned out of faculty into doing work starting as a director for planning and assessment at an institution. I've been working in institutional effectiveness, including accreditation, planning, assessment of student learning outcomes, program review, sort of the entire ball of wax with respect to institutional effectiveness, as well as serving as a vice president for academic and student affairs and as a provost, and clearly kept the emphasis on looking at planning and integrated planning in particular. And as a former accreditation liaison officer and now a peer reviewer with the Higher Learning Commission, one of the things that's also incredibly important is documenting your institutional effectiveness work, especially around planning, because all of the accrediting bodies require evidence of integrated systematic planning in your institution. And that includes how you're managing your resources and allocating them. Are they in line with your goals and objectives and strategies? And how are you using student learning outcome assessment, program review data, both from academic program review and administrative program review, to really kind of have this flywheel of planning, implementation, resource allocation, evaluation working on your campus. And I know when I first started in this area, one of the big really challenges was we were doing all this on spreadsheets. Who had the Excel file for this, who had the Excel file for that. And unfortunately, in the work I do now, that's still the case. And so, one of the things that's really important here is what kind of technology solutions are available to help you do this planning work, document what you're doing on your campus so that you can be more efficient and generate the reports you need and all of those kinds of things. But this is the time to really think about integrated planning. And from SCUP's point of view, there are three major components to integrated planning. It's about people, so it's a collaborative process that aligns the institution and helps the institution be change ready and nimble. So collaboration, alignment, nimble are the three things that are built as sort of the foundation of our definition of integrated planning. And that's how we support institutions of higher education and those corporate entities that support higher education institutions in the entire planning process.
So I'm curious to learn, Nick, like, why is it now that, the idea of finally, harnessing integrated strategic planning, why is it now sitting as a top priority on presidents' desks compared to maybe 3 years ago?
Yeah, I think a good bit of it is around three things, and I kind of stumbled on these three things when I was a sitting provost and was a panelist for a SCUP meeting. The convener of the panel said, I don't want to surprise anybody, so this is a question we're going to lead with. And he asked us a couple of days before the meeting, what keeps you up at night? And so as I pondered that question, three things came to mind as I was cycling through all of the things that impact higher ed. And they sort of fell into three buckets: cost, compliance, and relevance. The cost of our educational experience and the cost to institutions to provide the educational experience. And so thinking about how do we manage costs and how that becomes an important component with that. The second is all of the compliance demands that we're all faced, which is a lot of the work of the IE office. You're talking about iPads, common data set, state reporting, reporting dashboards, internal use, and other stakeholders that need to do that, have that kind of information, even your campus committees to be able to make data-informed decisions. And then finally, and especially, it seems to have intensified over the last few years and even accelerated, is how do we demonstrate that higher education is still relevant? So thinking about these three things, I believe that this is one of the reasons why individuals are looking to integrated planning as a strategy or as the discipline to be able to integrate your planning processes, to be able to address questions campuses get, campus leaders, often the president: why do you cost so much? Or how do you manage your costs on your campus? And talking with the board members, parents, all of those kinds of things. And then also managing compliance, as we've seen, we've gone through various upticks in compliance demands for institutions. And again, the argument regarding, is higher education still relevant? And a week doesn't go by where somebody is publishing a report, whether it's Heckinger or Gallup or someone saying, higher education has lost its relevance. And so how do you make the relevance case? Well, I think you start with your mission and you back it with data. And so I think that that's where things have brought us to this particular point in time, where you really need these mission-driven, data-informed processes to give you opportunities to talk about these things in meaningful ways that people can understand.
Yeah, it's interesting that in talking to maybe 30 people a month, that they're still doing a lot of this work siloed, and a lot of paper pushing, and there's no real organizing principle, and there's not like the investment in technologies to help them build the efficiencies they need. And I see a lot of institutions are still like kind of working modularly on, let's fix this problem, let's fix that problem. I feel like they don't understand the concept of integrated strategic planning. Should we give a definition of that for people to think about? Or
Sure, actually, yeah, actually, I'll give you, the definition that we use at SCUP. That really is our litmus test for the work that we do, the content that we create and generate, and also it's the guide for our integrated planning workshops that we provide as well. And it is this: integrated planning is a sustainable approach to planning that builds relationships, aligns the organization, and emphasizes preparedness for change. So, again, planning begins and ends with campus culture and people. They will either be your best champions or they'll be your best threat to stop your planning process. I had a friend of mine who was president of an institution, and he used to refer to those folks who were your campus barriers as the pot lids. As soon as things got cooking, the pot lid came and put the lid on the pot to try to dampen down the activity. So your culture matters. I mean, Drucker, there's the old Drucker quote about culture will eat your strategy for lunch or breakfast, depending upon what meal he may have been having when he was speaking. But nevertheless, culture matters, and you really work within the boundaries of your culture. Planning is a manifestation of institutional culture. It's your values, it's your mission, it's your vision, and it guides and directs everything you do. And so that's why it's important to invest people. And you need more than buy-in. I try to stay away from the phrase buy-in and really talk about commitment, because it's both a cognitive and an emotional commitment to the institution and the process and the work. So that's where people come in. Now, alignment speaks, Donna, directly to what you're talking about, what makes an integrated plan integrated. And it's really, how do you align your institutional processes, as we're fond of saying at SCUP, up, down, and sideways. So you begin to think about what's at the grassroots and how does that lead up, what's at the top and how does that go down, and how do you then banner, a really boundary span across your silos to create that integrated plan. It's really important to focus on this, because in my experience with Higher Learning Commission and going to annual meetings for years, they typically have a couple of vice presidents every year at their annual meeting talk about the top 5 criteria and substandards that institutions are still struggling with. And in the top 5 for at least the last 5 years, for those of you who know HLC speak, it's criterion 5, substandard C. It is the systematic integrated planning and resource allocation and process improvement on your campus. So it really is integrated planning as that part of your institutional effectiveness program. And it has remained in the top 5 for years. It's one of those places where institutions need to submit monitoring reports, or they're having focus visits, or depending upon how they've been struggling and how long, it may be an on notice. So, if institutions are still having a difficult time with the institutional effectiveness criterion, at least in the Higher Learning Commission domain. And so, it's really key then to try to understand, well, what makes integrated planning integrated? And it is really, how do you collaborate across the institution and engage as many stakeholders as you can, both on campus and off campus? And then how do you coordinate and align your internal processes? Are you taking your student outcome assessment data and program review data of your academic and administrative areas, using that to inform your priorities that you've set, and also then set priorities based on that evidence? How do you allocate your resources? It's not just money. There's 4 areas that typically talk about with respect to integrated planning. It's finance, certainly, but it's also HR, facilities, and IT. those 4 areas serve as sort of the foundational areas of support for campus that you need to align to have a plan, that a strategic plan, move to the operational phase and be effective. So those are things that are really, really important to think about. And then how do you know you're being successful? How are you evaluating it? And then how are you using that data of evaluation to, again, inform your goals and objectives and align resources? That's the flywheel activity there, as Collins talked about flywheel. But really, that's what integrated planning is. And you have to have evidence for it. It's not just enough to say you do it. You actually have to show the evidence for those activities. Do you have evidence of committee meetings and committee minutes and reports that you generate, that you are having resource conversations in light of data regarding student learning and institutional operations? And is that informing your planning process as you move ahead? Are your faculty appropriately credentialed? And so, every one of the every one of the accreditation bodies have standards and policies around setting credentialing for people who teach your programs, deliver your programs. The same thing regarding your staff. And are they appropriately qualified and with the experience to be able to have students have a great experience on campus and carry forward your mission as an institution. So there are some groups that think, some institutions think they're doing integrated planning. And you know what? They may be in some pockets of the institution, but the key is it systemic throughout the institution? Not just a department here or a center or institute there. Is it systemic throughout the institution? And that's really the standard now. This is a customary organizational practice in higher education, is integrated planning. So it's not something special you're being asked to do. It's something that you're trying to do to be more effective, to help be good stewards of resources, of course, towards student success, which is really the final barrier. I mean, the gold standard is are our students successful? How do you use integrated planning then to be able to reach that goal of student success and institutional thriving?
So it sounds like from the conversations I have with some people, they know they want to do it, and the senior people know they want to do it. So probably people are coming into your learning environments or your courses, and it sounds like, people need a framework. Where do we start, right? So where do we start, and who's sitting at the table for those conversations? Who are the first people that you see that need to really own the accountability for assembling and using a framework that's
Sure.
going to be able to be replicated across the institution?
Sure, and really, when we focus on is really how do you create a campus culture that is oriented towards integrated planning. Now, every person on the campus doesn't have to be intimately involved, but they need to know what part they play. And so that one of the things that is really, really important is to be very public about it. So having a very good communication plan about institutional direction, what the priorities are, how they're set, how they're resourced, and what the expectations are. Everybody contributes in some way. And that includes students as well, in terms of thinking about how students are involved. More and more I'm seeing students on planning committees at institutions. So they're also having a student voice that's contributing. And really, again, as we mentioned, as I mentioned in our definition from SCUP, it's a collaborative environment. And that means cross-functional relationships and cross-functional membership on planning committees. And a good bit of this could be what is your institutional culture? Last institution I worked at, we had 24 people on the university strategic planning committee, because there were some questions around trust and transparency. And so what we did was we met the community where it was. And that was meaning a broad, large number of representatives from all of the stakeholder groups on campus. We had a member of the board. We had individuals who were appointed from the staff governance body, individuals who were appointed from the faculty governance body. We had elected faculty, we had administrative and staff members, and we had students. So begin to think about your campus culture and who needs to be at the table. And some of it is how mature is your planning process on campus? Are your institution who's went through several cycles of planning and has been effective at it? And I would call that a mature institution. If you're struggling with maturity in planning, you're going to probably need more representation to build the momentum necessary to be able to move to that maturity of planning. And so, it's really important to think about who needs to be at the table. It's at some point, everybody does. But there are some individuals who would be more responsible for leading. Typically the president sets the wheel in motion by saying, it's time for a planning process, and charges a task force or charges a body to get it done. And often it's not unusual to have a provost and a faculty member co-chair, and then have membership around that table who are, in a sense, the leaders of the planning process, and then them going out and engaging the rest of the campus to get input and information to build a plan so that it's a broad level, again, commitment on the campus that individuals, see, can see it, and they can see their work and they see themselves invested in it. Last institution I was at, one of the ways we built some of that commitment was by when we got to a point where the plan's last draft was completed. We went to the Student Government Association, we went to the Staff Association and the Faculty Governance Body and asked them for a vote to endorse the plan. All three groups overwhelmingly endorsed the plan. Large numbers of people voting to support the strategic plan that we had developed. We took that evidence to the board. When, of course, the board's the final level of endorsement, they saw the endorsements, they had been updated continuously through board committees, and it was it was really unanimous approval of the strategic plan. So that's the kind of work that you need to understand your culture to be able to use your culture to be able to move the process forward. And that's why I'm seeing a lot of planning processes now that claim to be integrated, may be integrated at a very low level, or not integrated at all, because they think, well, we have we do budgets and we have a dashboard, so we're an integrated institution. Well, that's not it at all. So it takes a lot more than that.
I have a question from David. Try to talk, David. I think I allowed you to talk.
Hi, this is David Mosley. So one of the things that I think I've seen in my experience is leadership can set the tone, but there's a lot of work that has to go into explaining it at the unit level. Can you speak a little bit about some strategies to help accomplish that?
Sure, and I'll give you some from my experience that I found worked, and in talking with others, it's really taking your show on the road. Having an opportunity to be invited to department meetings or division meetings where you have time on their agenda to begin to socialize, the process for your plan, holding campus community meetings as well. So you could have, bigger meetings, you could have smaller meetings. I remember the last plan I worked on, I went to all of the divisions of the institution, got on their agenda and gave them a presentation and answered questions and stayed until all the questions were answered, and also had a standing open agreement with any department chair who wanted me to come to talk to their department. And it's continuing, that iterative, trying to get people to think about where they are in the plan. And being able to provide them that kind of opportunity to talk with you about it. One of the things that I saw in the last institution I worked at that I knew we turned a corner around planning was that I heard people talking about it in meetings differently. When a new initiative was being proposed or some activity was going on campus, people were asking the question, how does this fit with the strategic plan? which goal under the plan does this advance? So there was a corner that was turned just by looking and being available and having a commitment and following through. That's the real key, is you have to follow through. When you say you're open to meeting with people, you need to be open to meeting with people. And I found, for me, I found that helpful. And when I've talked to other people who are similar positions as mine, they said it really does take, one day at a time, one department at a time, sometimes one faculty member or staff person at a time, to be able to help them understand why the planning process is important. How does it add value to the institution? Because you think that, well, gosh, that must be so tedious and time consuming. And at times it is, but the payoff at the end is incredible. And then some people who might be some of your biggest critics can often become some of your biggest champions after that, when you have a conversation with them and they become those champions on campus to help individuals understand why this is important in the institution and what is the value and their place in it. So it's not something that simply can be driven top down any longer. And it really needs to be an activity that's cultivated and well explained and well taught on campus. One of the other things, David, I tried to do is that, let's face it, most people, especially faculty and some staff, really don't know much, if anything at all, about higher education, planning. And so, and there was the common turnover on the committee that I was co-chairing and staffing on institutional planning. So, every year, every 2 years, there were new people in the room. So I never wasted an opportunity at our monthly meetings to do some professional development on what higher education planning is and how it works, so that the people on the planning committee could develop really a knowledge base of integrated planning that they then can take out to the rest of campus. And so that's really, really important to build. One of the first lessons I learned in the very first seminar on planning that I attended was the speaker said, good planning is well taught. Because there's, unless your field is planning, people in higher education generally don't have an inclination toward planning. So how do you make it real for them? It's basically providing them with the professional development that can help them be successful. So David, I hope that was helpful.
And the technology tools.
Yes.
What I see is, every day that people are doing everything, manually. Still, it's shocking to me to see how many people are still trying to organize this stuff in a way. I think that is also an impediment to people being able to get things done, right? It's like they're collecting all this information, but it's all over the place, and trying to get the data organized in a way that each unit or everybody in the departments can see it and make analysis of it. And I think it's frustrating. It's how people start to put stuff off because they don't have access to the information in a way that they can consume it appropriately. Which leads me to asking you, while we still have some time, how can we use technology to help with this integrated planning? And then maybe we could bring Larry in so that he can show us a little bit what that could look like to actually help that process and help inform people and where they are in their integrated strategic planning process.
Sure thing, Donna. And you're right, especially as you were talking just now, I'm thinking that also adds to the planning fatigue. When people say, I'm just tired, and thinking about, again, all the manual handling of data and report creating and all of those kinds of things. And this adds to the planning fatigue. It also adds to assessment fatigue. You talk to faculty and the assessment people on campus, it's the same kind of problem that you can see. I think one of the things that's really important is that there are a number of tools now, and SPOL, I think, has done a really nice job developing these to assist individuals who are involved in planning with the technology to be able to move it off the desktop, move it out of a person's Excel file, and have it more easily available and more readily, purposeful, so that if you need a report, you could generate a report. You're looking at, well, where are the resources that were aligned to this, to this particular tactic? How are we doing on spending that down? Does that need more resource investment? You can do those kinds of reporting that's necessary. I think what ends up happening is you have people spending less time manually dealing with the data, input and all those other, not that people don't have to input data, they do, but it's a different level. But really what you want to get to is analysis and forecasting. Think about every minute you gain for analysis and forecasting when you don't have those minutes dedicated to entering data into spreadsheets. And so when you think about being able to take advantage of your expertise on campus, and they don't get sucked into basically just the data handling, and they can actually get into data analysis and the analytics that are necessary to help you make wise decisions as an institution. I think it's critical to be able to leverage the technologies that are emerging. And I think that SPOL's done a really nice job developing a number of different solutions for folks that can be really value adds for the institution as you continue to work towards integrated planning.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we'll segue over to Larry. Larry, if you want to jump on, but I will say that there is a real importance in having an organizing principle that's easy to navigate throughout the system, that looks alike, so that you're not having, where things are. It's captured and consumed in a way that people are all looking at the same thing and not different systems, something for assessment, something for accreditation, something for planning. Having, and I think what SPOL does really well is, interoperable. All of our things are integrated so that you can go from module to module and make that connection, tie things to resources, tie things to student success. And I think that helps get rid of what you were talking about, that fatigue,
Right,
and it helps
right.
people to be able to say, now I see how I'm connected and why this is so important. Yeah.
Right. And it really builds that data definition. So when you look at a number, everybody understands what that number is, not having 5 different understandings or calculations for like student FTEs. I mean, that's one of the things I was always chasing. Well, everybody wanted a different definition for a student FTE, and getting some data dictionary and common understanding of data definitions. And I think that that's really key as well. But Larry, tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm obviously sitting here listening in, and I don't think there's any accident that SCUP and SPOL found each other, because ultimately, what SCUP is really preaching is very much the philosophy of the technology that we have created, particularly where planning is concerned. It's centered around the idea of transparency, collaboration, alignment, and the ability to be nimble. You said it before, that is very much the philosophy of the tool that we have created. We, in the system, you can enter that cycle, that planning process cycle, at any point, whether that be at your department, and your department is creating a plan, or you've been distributed a goal or a task that needs to be accomplished. Ultimately, when you talk about it's coming from the top, it's coming from the bottom, and it's coming from sideways, that is what SPOL is designed to accommodate. So, I will very quickly sort of share my screen, just kind of demonstrate again quickly what we mean by that. So ultimately, one of the things that you can start with is your goals, and those goals can be anything. Yes, a strategic plan is typically how we talk about plans and the direction and vision of an institution. So whether those be a strategic planning goals, goals associated with a district, facility plans, your plan set can exist in the system, giving visibility to your planners. That's that transparency. the ability to kind of go through and have a view of the direction that the institution is going in prior to any plans that you may be putting together, or simply so that you can associate your plans to some area that the institution needs to accomplish. So at this point, you can create a plan, an objective, and that plan can be departmental, and that plan can ultimately feed into any goals or be connected, align to any goals that the institution has put out. So if I have a unit plan objective, something that I'm my department is trying to accomplish, we can still connect it through that visibility. We can connect it to any institutional goals, any goals that the institution is aiming towards accomplishing. Those goals can also be that planning process. I'm sorry, that unit plan objective can also align with things like finance and facilities and IT, so that that single planning process that we had can be pulled out of a system by virtue of a type or by virtue of a priority, can be pulled out of the system, so that that one planning process that the department may be engaging in is feeding all of the different areas that I need to be able to ask questions or pull reports out of the system. We carve our objectives into individual tasks and break them down. And it is at that level that we request financial resources, so that you can get an account by account breakdown of where our planning objectives that have now been associated and aligned with goals are being broken down account by account by the financial request, financial resources that are being requested in order to accomplish it. This in turn gives the institution so much intelligence about how much our plans are going to cost us, how much individual projects are going to cost us, making decisions about resource allocation in the system. So a lot of what institutions are trying to accomplish at an alignment level can be mitigated by having the proper technology to help support what may already be happening on campus, but is maybe could be more efficiently organized. So it looked like there's a couple questions that came in. All right, so let's see what we got. The program's name is SPOL, SPOL Diamond. You can find it at spol.com. And obviously, if anyone is interested in seeing more and seeing how the application connects, has any questions, and certainly would like to ask further questions of Nick, we're obviously all available for any additional information that you might be looking for. So Don, I can turn things back over to you.
All right. Well, folks, I mean, we are here for you, and there's still 23 of you, and we want to make this interactive as we can. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Who has any questions that they'd like to ask of Larry or Nick?
One of the things maybe to help with the conversation too is tell us your biggest challenges or barriers on your campus to integrated planning. So maybe there are some things that we could share here to be able to understand some of the things that you're facing in the work that you're doing.
Hi, I have a question. It's not so much about what you just said, but we are starting a new plan here in 2023. And we're trying to make everything, like you said, more integrated. If we were interested in looking at your program, would we be able to contact you or communicate with you about it to see how it would work with us?
Absolutely. I will drop my email in the chat, and I'll also give you the link to our our webpage, and you can take a look at the Society for College and University Planning website. And in addition to our professional development workshops, we also have a whole host of other resources. We have tools on our website for integrated planning. We publish a journal 4 times a year that is full of articles on the doing of integrated planning, best practices, what to avoid, all of those kinds of things. So I will drop both into the chat. So anyone who's interested in taking a look at us or dropping me a note, feel free to do so. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add to that, obviously, if there's anything about seeing the application with an institution's information and what you, how it might work for a process that you envision, we are also obviously available to have a conversation, show you the application, show how the connections are made, and pull that information out
Yes,
as
because
necessary.
the example you just gave us was very interesting, but it was really fast. So just to kind of work with it slower.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, a question come in and now I cannot find it. Somebody was asking something about the product and I don't see it in the chat.
Well, there's a question to Larry from Lewis about printed materials that describe your line of products around integrated planning.
Yes,
Matt.
and the answer, Lewis, yes, of course, and hello, Lewis. Yes, obviously, the new version update. You can just reach out to client services here, and obviously we will reach out to you at this point. But if anyone else has any information or wants any information about the application, we're happy to provide anything that you're looking for. Lewis, I've taken a note and we'll definitely reach out to you and make sure that you have what you need.
Thank you, Larry.
You got it.
There was another question that came up. I don't know. I'm seeing questions come up and disappear on my side, so I don't know what's happening. Allison, I think it was you. You could talk. I think I've unmuted you.
Right. I put something in the chat just where I was really interested in Larry's example, and it sounded like there's a couple other people too, just where, you know, he talked about all the connections, and I saw the connection to the strategic plan, but then there's like to the library and all these others. And so I was interested in seeing on that example how it was used there on that specific example. So like connections to the library, and then perhaps even how someone would know that that plan is finished, close the loop kind of thing. So yes, love the example. Thanks, Larry.
You got it, not a problem. And actually, you know, it's just really because of time. I didn't want to go on too long that I moved through that quickly, but let's talk about it a little bit more depth. So ultimately, when I create an objective, most objectives in the system, or all objectives in the system, are organized by your department. So what we do in the system is we create 2 things. First of all, planning units, which are essentially your departments, groups of individuals that are going to engage in planning for a common cause. Those units can report to one another, building your organizational chart in the system. That actually drives our approval process, our workflow, so that as we are creating our plans, we can move them through a chain of approval. Ultimately, institutional goals is where we store goals and plans that we want to connect our planning objectives to. But there are other data stores available on the page that you can customize to your institutional process so that you can associate your individual objectives to any specific type or perhaps priority that we want to be able to report out on. So by creating objective types, as an example, we can create things like student access and success, technology, college personnel, so that while this particular plan may be for our department and certainly connects to goals within our strategic plan, it may also be serving another category that I want to be able to pull out of the system by saying, show me all objectives by type technology, as an example. Priorities can be done so, used the same way. Now we can relabel any of these fields in the system to match your institution's nomenclature. But what we're really trying to accomplish here is a single process of planning that serves a variety of different stakeholders around the institution so that information can be pulled out of the system much easier. As we are developing our plans, we might, and I'm sorry, please forgive me, it looks like I timed out because I was sitting too long. As we are pulling our plans, we might want to report our results as we are first developing our objectives. For example, we might indicate what our intended results are, how we're going to assess success and performance as a part of the creation of the objective itself. As we are closing the loop on that cycle, that planning cycle, we might indicate what our actual results are and our user results. For the more mature planning process, we might indicate a gap analysis that will tie together our intended result, actual result, and user result into an analysis and an action plan. All of these, of course, are reportable fields. So this is kind of that planning cycle that we might go through and how we inform the variety of different stakeholders, what our intention is and what happened as we close the loop. Is that an appropriate example? Does that get to the heart of the question?
Yes, thank you, Larry. Appreciate it.
You got it. So I think there was one other question here. Texas has been called a state that loves plans, but that does very little integrated planning. We have a myriad of plans that once created sit on a shelf but are not used in a meaningful, dynamic way. What is the expectation from regional accreditors that all these plans are connected? This might be better for Nick. What is the expectation from regional accreditors that all plans are connected, state, higher ed, strategic plan, system level, institutional strategic plan, unit level plans, and can SPOL easily connect these in a meaningful way? My part of that is that yes, I think that the example we just showed is an example where we can report out of the system a variety of different purposes for which plans are made and pull that out of the system. And then for Nick's part, I guess, what are you finding in terms of the accreditor's expectation on the connection of those plans and where SCUP meets the accreditation requirements?
Exactly. No, thanks. Thanks, Larry. Yeah, the piece is that the accreditors are expecting to see evidence of how you practice integrated planning. And that evidence takes a lot of different forms. I'm most familiar with the Higher Learning Commission because that's where I served as an ALO and that's where I'm a peer reviewer. But they actually have a policy statement that actually includes evidence that they expect peer reviewers and campuses to generate to demonstrate they're doing, they're really meeting all of their criteria for accreditation. So when you begin to look at the integrated planning area of the criteria for accreditation, they expect to look at minutes, agenda and minutes from meetings of critical campus groups like the board. Is it on the board agenda? What did the board say? How did they decide? Did they pass any resolutions? Can you track that back to budget allocations? And as a peer reviewer, that's what I'm looking at. In terms of thinking about what's happening on a campus. So they say they're doing this initiative, but does it show up in the budget? And if it is, great, but what's going on at the committee level that oversees that initiative? So if you say, well, we have a student success committee, well, okay, are you looking at retention, persistence, and completion? And what do your meeting minutes look like? Are you reviewing the data? Are you making recommendations? Are you aligning resources? all of those kinds of things. And how are you communicating that outward? How does the board know what that committee's doing? How about the faculty senate? You know, if that standing committees in the faculty senate that also deal with that. You have an assessment committee on campus. How are they, you know, what do they do? What kind of reporting do they require? What kind of budget line is there for assessment on campus? Same thing for program review. So how do all of these pieces begin to factor in? And you could drive it down to the academic department level or center or institute or other areas within the division. You look at their budgets. How are they spending that money? Do they have a commitment to student research? Well, how much money do they have to support that? Or other kinds of resources to be able to support student research? Is there any evidence of student learning as a consequence of student research? And are there learning outcomes associated with that? And how does that inform the department with respect to asking for faculty hires? All of those kinds of things need to be interwoven, and that's integrated planning at the grass level. You know, how can you, even at the unit level, demonstrate that this is what these are our priorities as a department. Here's how we aligned our financial and human resources and technology and facility that we have access to. This is how our students are faring on our curriculum, and here's how we're making decisions. Once upon a time, I was a department chair, and our department, the psychology department, we used the major field achievement test published by ETS as an assessment for our seniors. I made requests for faculty based on poor performance in some of the subtests on that particular measure to my dean. I got three faculty lines to be able to support the work. So this is integrated planning, and quite frankly, it's that simple, and to demonstrate that. So and I can understand what you were saying about the state of Texas, because I've seen it in other places as well, and even within institutions, private and public, saying, well, we do integrated planning, or we struggle with integrated planning because of this lack of coordination, and also in some ways the lack of institutional will. I mean, your campus leaders need to lead on this. And governance and leadership are two critical factors that help this work and help you move this needle. And ultimately, let's face it, what's at stake here is student success and institutional thriving. So to be able to leverage your planning and plans, and then also to have it orient towards being a great institution, contributing to the public good, and then also contributing to the good of your students. For me, that at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.